So I saw a couple of videos on YouTube that kind of inspired this speakdom. One video is called Why C Students Are More Successful Than A Students, and the other one is Why A Students Work for C Students. And the two videos are really interesting because, my entire life, I was never really an A student when it came to public school. Even as a little kid, I came into public school not speaking a word of English. For those who don't know, I'm an immigrant. I came from Cuba. I spoke Spanish the first 5-6 years of my life exclusively. I did not learn English until elementary school. And now I speak English better than the kids that were there who were Americans who knew the language, day in and day out. So it's interesting because the video pointed out some really interesting things about C students versus A students. And some of the stuff was very much a generalization, okay? Because being an A student in class, or in school, that is, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be an A student, go for it. But being an A student versus being a C student does not necessarily mean you're smarter than them. That's the biggest myth. And that's why the whole grading system is kind of flawed, because we tend to look at kids that have good grades as being, quote, smarter when they're not actually smarter than C students. A lot of times they're scholastically, more efficient because they are harder workers in the school system. But that does not mean that a C student is not as smart. In fact, there's tons of C students who actually wound up being visionaries, who wound up being millionaires, if not billionaires. Like, for example, George Lucas, he was not an A student. He became a billionaire, a creator of Star Wars. I mean, that's a pretty big accomplishment, I would say, right? The biggest franchise in movie history, maybe, that in the MCU. But it's one of those things where, we're kind of programmed by the system to get straight A's and that you get rewarded. But what ends up happening, and the video in question brings up some good points, but I'll bring up my version of the good points. What ends up happening is C students are a lot of times nonconformists. A lot of C students they're not lazy, even though there might be a dab of laziness. They're just not inspired. If I'm in school and I'm taking math class, I don't care about cross multiply. I don't care about the Pythagorean theorem. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. And I know a lot of you guys feel me on this one. Like, if you're going to be a mathematician or an astrologer or astronomer or something involving math, an architect, then I can see you caring. I could totally see that, But if your goal is not to really use math in anything more than a practical sense, I don't see the purpose of learning that stuff. I mean, I really don't. And yet I went through the entire school system and I never learned how to do my taxes, how to finance a home. These are skills that I think we all need to know. We need to know how to do our own taxes, even though we can always go to H&R Block. It's helpful to know what to do, especially if you're self-employed. You can hire a CPA. I do my own taxes. I don't even need to spend money on a CPA because I know what I'm doing. At least I think I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And then you've got people who, I don't need math. Not that level of math. If I understand basic arithmetic and maybe some algebra, I can figure out all the problems in my life. And that's the God's honest truth. I have never had a use in my entire life for damn cross multiply, ever in my life. Or calculus or any of that stuff. Now, if you're into that stuff, go for it. You know what I mean? I respect you. I was never into it. I liked going to class to learn languages. I liked reading. I liked that kind of stuff. I was into that. I liked my electives because they're my electives. And here's a crazy little fact about me. When I went to college for engineering, I got straight A's. In college, I got principal's honor roll. So how is it that in college I had straight A's and yet in high school I could barely get a 2.0 GPA? I'll tell you why. A couple reasons. Number one, I goofed off a lot, which a lot of us did. Number two, I did not care. Number three, I wasn't paying for it. When you're paying for school, you end up kind of working a bit harder. And number four, I was invested because I knew that if I passed the classes, I'd be able to get a degree and actually get a job, and actually make money and earn income and have a career. You know what I'm saying? That was me as a college kid. Plus, I was more mature. I was older. That's obviously the situation too. I was in my 20s, not in my teens. But this whole thing about, C students and all that. And I remember there was this kid in high school who he was like a passive aggressive friend. Have you ever had that friend who is your friend, but he's kind of a douchebag to you? He's kind of jealous of you, like, that kind of passive aggressive behavior. I'm not going to say his name or anything, but he was my friend, but he was also just kind of a dick and somewhat of a bully to me. And he was pissed off, I remember, because I got a boost in my grades with this program that helped me do that. And he thought it was like cheating, even though the program was instituted by the county. And I was able to go ahead and pass my classes even without having A's. And I remember he was so envious. Well, it turns out that where that guy works now, he makes way less money than I do. And it's one of those things where, a lot of these A students seem to be very pompous about their grades. Like, oh, I'm an A student. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And it's kind of insulting. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're an A student, but what good is being an A student when you're in your teens, when you have to pay bills when you're a grown person? See what I'm saying? When you're a grown up. So, this whole idea of C students being the bosses, there is something to that. C students tend to wander off in class and think about stuff more. They also tend to question things more. And when you are a person who is not just a slave to the system, you end up being more of a free spirit. And if you're more of a free spirit, you end up being more likely to become self-employed and or become a business owner and not work for anybody but yourself, and then hire these A students to work for you. So yeah, there is something to that. I'm not saying, again, that all A students are this way or C students. You can't generalize everybody, but it is a generalization that it does happen. It is something that happens that I've seen with my own eyes. I've seen people who are D and F students become bosses because they actually start caring. If a teacher, it's the teacher's job, in my opinion, unless you're dealing with kids that have disabilities or learning disorders, it is the teacher's job to inspire the students to learn the material. Whether it be, doing contests and games or something in the class to get students to learn the material. Whether it be watching, documentaries or movies or analyzing things, whatever technique you want to use to teach students, I feel like you have to get their fucking attention. Because kids have a lot on their minds, man. When we were teenagers, we're going through puberty. We're thinking about, girls or guys, if you're into that, vice versa, if you're a girl. We're thinking about, making sure we get decent grades for our parents, but we really don't care that much. Like, we're thinking about whatever stories being gossiped around. Like, obviously, you don't have as much responsibility when you're a teenager as you do when you're an adult, but it's still something where you have to make sure that every minute in that classroom counts, and I just think that the whole system is kind of flawed in that. I've talked about this before, but it's been interesting to me. It always has. And it's funny because somebody like me, who is always questioning the academic system, at least in the United States, I was a C student. I questioned it, and because of that, I'm thinking outside the box. So as a result of that, I'm just a better logical, thinker, and that's been what the articles have said in the videos. Also, I'm not a submissive follower. And also the other thing too is when you're a C student, you have your own sort of definition of success. You know what I'm saying? Like the A students think that getting good grades is a success, and that is a good accomplishment. Congratulations if that's what you like. For a C student, like we talked about earlier in the video, it's about money. You know what I mean? It's about the future, not just money, but also like your future, your career. If you want to be like a ballroom dancer, you really have no reason to learn most of the stuff you learn in high school. Like some of the stuff is useful, right? Like you should learn things that they teach you. History is interesting. History to me is just more interesting than it is useful. You know what I mean? I could go through life and not have a fucking clue about World War II, and it would absolutely not affect my career. Unless, of course, I want to be a YouTuber who covers history. History to me is just more interesting than it is useful, and then language arts and writing I think is very useful. But again, you have to apply it in a practical sense. And I don't think that enough students and enough teachers, have figured that part out. It has to be applied in the real world, And again, if your goal is to be like a math person, if you want to be like I said, architect, then by all means take geometry and have a ball, but that just wasn't me. That just was not me, And I feel like also the fact that C students are not perfectionists is actually a pro. Like being a perfectionist can be a pro and a con. not being one can also be a pro and a con, because it means that you're more loose and more open to change. There's a lot of things, a lot of reasons as to why C students end up being very successful. In fact, business.com wrote an article called Why C Students May Be the Biggest Successes. It's out there. I can tell you one thing for certain. There are so many other content creators that I've spoken to who do this full time, who love what they do, even though it's not always perfect, who were not A students, dude. They weren't. I mean, they got A's once in a while, but they weren't like the straight A principal's honor roll kid. I didn't get that until I was in freaking college. The last time I got principal's honor roll, actually, I never got principal's honor roll. I got high honor roll, which is A's and a couple of B's in elementary school. But after that, it was all B's and C's. I didn't care. I did not care. I was never a morning person. School, the way the school system is, was just not my thing. I liked my friends and I liked going to hang out with them, but I just didn't care that much for school. But I'm also not an idiot. I have a very high IQ. Not bragging, but I do. It's been confirmed. It's just that, and that's the other thing too, is people with high IQs tend to be C students sometimes too. It's not about how smart you are. That's not what it's about at all. Getting good grades means you do the work. That's pretty much what it is. You do the work. It doesn't mean you're any more or less smart than anybody else. Now, if you're listening to this and you're in school, try the best you can. But also understand that, there are different roads you can take in life. You can go to tech school. You can go to a trade school. I don't know if Job Corps still exists, but I know a bunch of kids that didn't do so well, and then they went to I know one guy in particular, a guy who I know IRL, who went to Job Corps and learned how to be a chef, and to this day he's still a chef, and he cooks, and he's a very good cook. There are different trades you can go in. If you want to be a teacher, obviously you have to get good grades for that, obviously, and scholastically do well. But if you want to be something else, if you want to, like I mentioned the cook thing, if you want to go in the Army, the Army will take care of you as well. The Army will help pay for your college. There's so many different options out there for kids. When I say kids, I don't mean little kids. I mean people under 30, like 20s and teens. Young people, there's so many, and even older people, there's so many options out there, yo. And student loan bills are pretty high as well, too. But if you go to a trade school or a tech school, it tends to be a lot less expensive. And you can, if you're good at job hunting, if you have the skills to go interview and find jobs like I did, you'll be fine. Of course, this all depends on where you live. There are factors to this, too. So don't think that I'm over here trying to guide you in a certain direction. You need to do your own research, figure out if the career is in your area, you may have to move. There's all kinds. If you live in Kansas, for example, you're not going to be a freaking movie star. You got to move to LA for that. You see what I'm saying? You have to be practical about this. Don't be an idiot. Use some common sense here. You know what I'm saying? But also, like I said, don't feel so bad if you're not the A student, because there's plenty of non-A students that do pretty well. That's it. Thank you so much for watching this Speak Them. I hope that I was able to get through to some people and, spit the good word, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.